A very warm welcome to this clinical discussion. My name is Joanna Taylor and I am Director of NOI Group Europe. And I am so delighted to be joined today by David Butler. Welcome, David.
Hello, Joe. Hello, Joan. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe, for so many years of helping spread valuable information throughout the UK and the world. And I think you've done so many of these, you know as much about pain treatment and rehab as some of your guests, I would think.
Well, I don't know. I do learn a lot. It is absolutely fascinating. And I love speaking to all of our guests. Yeah, thank you, Dave. That's very kind of you to say. David needs very little introduction, but I am going to ask him to just let us know what he is currently working on and what he is most passionate about at the moment.
Great. Is my screen okay, Joe?
Your screen is
You can
great.
see me?
We can
Yes,
see
I don't
you.
want to blind people with the ball patch here.
No, you're not blinding people with your head. I
Oh, look, Joe,
promise.
actually, I'm trying to retire, but I can't. Things that get too exciting. I
Yeah.
do keep an adjunct spot at the University of Adelaide. I've got rid of my last PhD students looking at osteoarthritis and pain and stroke and pain. And by the
Hmm.
way, that's an example of where this world of pain is going to. And I was trying to work out what I'm doing now, and I've decided that I'm a witness for change. And it's been 50 years, nearly 50 years of practice. I'm fundamentally a clinician. I still see a few patients, but I have a particular interest in nature-based prescriptions. And I'll talk a little bit about that later.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. I can't wait to hear more about that. It's amazing that you're still seeing patients, Dave. I didn't
Yeah, oh,
realize.
look, I can't let them go. And it made me think I'm a clinician at heart. I've tried a bit of research in my life. I do a bit of writing, but the heart is with someone in trouble.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. We may ask you to give us some examples later through this
Sure.
conversation about people you're working with, which would be lovely to hear. Thank you. Just a quick few housekeeping notes before we dive in. If you have any questions, then please drop them in the Q&A or in the chat. I'll monitor both of those. I would urge you to get your questions in sooner rather than later because we always run out of time and um, we like to get to as many questions as possible, but obviously we may not have time to get to them all. So the recording of this session will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and I will drop the link to that in the chat in just a second. And then at the end of the session, Dave and I are going to be telling you a little bit about the upcoming EP3 event that is at the beginning of June in Manchester. So if you'd like to know a bit more about that, then just hang on at the end, and you can find out what that's all about and who's going to be there. So let's get going. David, today's session is called The Contemporary Clinician, Educator, Mobiliser, Coach, and Naturalist. So I thought this was, as always, a brilliant title from you, totally intriguing, and I can't wait to hear what you've got to say about each one of these things. So you've been at the forefront of pain science education for decades. And when you look at the clinicians who are really making a difference for their patients right now, what is it that sets them apart?
Oh gosh, Joe, that's a good question to start. There's some obvious answers, but I guess what makes for me the contemporary high quality clinician. So I think first of all, they've got to be a clinical reasoner and someone who's not tied to one system, like tied to Mackenzie, CBT, or any of the other systems, but someone who takes the best out of all the offerings out there and makes it theirs. I also think the good quality clinician is one who continually lifts outcome expectations that by keeping up with basic sciences and evidence. I also think the top clinicians out there are those now who are delving into some of those problems that we once thought were too hard and left in the too hard basket, like complex regional pain syndrome, like male pelvic pain problems,
Mm.
like the pain of stroke. 70% of people who have a stroke have a chronic pain after, and it's totally, totally untouched. Cerebral palsy, pain in children and adolescents. So I see these quality clinicians thinking, hey, we've got some new tools. Let's go and try the too hard basket. And
Mm.
there's one other thing, Joe, that I think makes a quality clinician when I look around in my in my role, and it's they're nearly always humble. They're nearly always humble, and the more you know, the deeper you go, the more you realize maybe what you don't know.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Um, so you describe the contemporary clinician as an educator, a mobiliser coach, and naturalist. Can you tell us a little bit about what these four roles mean to you and why they matter?
Yeah, sure. I'd just like to make one comment first because I'm a real believer or feel that the contemporary clinician has been squeezed out there.
Mm,
Like we see, for example, you might go to a conference and there's a person who's speaking from their first person experience, which is fabulous. You see this, but I still don't see the clinicians up there speaking enough at conferences. And I think their voice needs to be heard. This is a huge amount of knowledge. Someone who's seen, a reasoner who's seen 500 patients with back pain. There's a lot of knowledge there. And I think, well, I hope this talk will maybe help the squeeze clinician a little bit. I'd like their voice to be heard more. I'd like their
mm,
expertise to be heard more. I'd like to see them at conferences. And in fact, at EP3, I've got a session where I'm going to interview four quality clinicians about
mm,
their life and career.
mm,
But it did mention I picked four things to chat about to this group: clinician as educator, clinician as a mobilizer, clinician as coach, and clinician as naturalist. So if we start off as clinician as educator, and I look at my 50 years of reflection and I think, gee, what massive shifts we've had. I remember as an undergraduate, when we had to sort of write up our patient notes, we'd always put on the top, we're going to educate the clinician. And then you
mm,
completely forgot about that. And then you went and squeezed something or put some fancy electrical machine on. And then we see the back school approaches, very biomedical, late last century, and
mm.
no great outcomes there. Um, I guess Lorimer and I wrote Explain Pain nearly 25 years ago, and now I guess we're part responsible. There's over 2 million copies out there. Um, I should be rich, Joe, but I've got to say 96% of those were downloaded free or stolen.
Yeah, you're spreading the
But you
knowledge
know,
there, spreading the
I've,
love.
that's right. I've got to spread the love. But the explain pain well. Some love it, some don't. And I've got to admit, we just threw a lot of pain biology out there without any education strategy. And I went back and did an education doctorate to try and get some some knowledge about sort of quality delivery. So it's this for us now. It's this chase. What is the best strategy to
Mm,
explain pain and other body-brain environmental constructions for a particular person and integrate it into overall rehab? However, I now see a significant issue in quality education for the quality contemporary clinician.
mm.
Briefly, rehabilitation is mired in behavioral philosophy. Okay, we all try and change the faulty behaviors that we see or pick up with the patient in front of us. Movement behaviors, thought behaviors, etc. Cognitive behavioral therapy, manual therapy, exercise therapies, cognitive functional therapies, they're all behaviorists. And there's some brilliant stuff there. There's some brilliant stuff there that we never let go, and we're thankful for it. But the education world gave up on behaviorism 50 years ago in favor of education systems under a broad philosophy called constructivism. So
Okay.
my push here is that if you are attempting education under pure behavioral thinking, some of us oldies remember the whack on the knuckles when you got something wrong, then
Mm.
you may be out of date. So one thing we at NOI and at EP3 will be pushing is this deeper constructivist education in certainly the treatment of pain.
Dave, would you
So
mind just explaining very briefly what you mean by constructivism?
sure. Most of the systems on Earth of education at undergraduate, postgraduate, and adult education are broadly constructivist. And what it means is that knowledge is not passively received, it's constructed as a person creates meaning from their experiences and builds on existing knowledge. Or perhaps said another way, the knowledge becomes theirs, not someone else's. And if I
Thank
was
you.
to bring this to the real clinical element now, the real clinical battlefront, I would ask the clinicians listening out there, where is your client at? So your client's with you, where are they at? And most of us do a good job there looking at bodily health. You don't want to forget that, their beliefs, issues around the injury. But a
Mm,
contemporary clinician going a bit further, enhancing their education strategies, may go a bit further and lift the lid, as I like to say, lift the lid and go a little bit deeper. For example, and ask things like, inquire, does the patient have adequate learning skills? Like, do they know the power of reflection? Do they know the power of seeking and reveling in an emotional achievement when there's some change? Do they have motivation skills? Do they have access to good reinforcement material?
mm,
And we can all carefully help them with this. The quality clinician may also now consider, is your patient a linear thinker, like things are straight in one line, usually a singular blame for a problem, or are they more emergent, meaning
mm,
pain is what we call an emergent phenomena. That is, many things come together, seemingly chaotic, to construct pain. But you can
mm,
see that if a patient doesn't have an emergent scaffold in their brain and you're telling them about pain, which is emergent, no wonder they look at many people blankly or go to sleep or
mm,
things bounce off their forehead. Now, you can teach a patient emergence, and there are models out there for it. And there's another key thing that I believe that the modern clinician would pick up is, does your patient have what we call a process or an entity ontology? So let's go to knee osteoarthritis. Knee osteoarthritis broadly around the world is still considered an entity, a disease, a thing, and unchangeable unless you have a new knee.
mm,
However, modern thinking is that osteoarthritis of the knee is a process, a slow, warm, immune-based process with many contributors. And you know, the tragedy out there, Joe, is that so many diagnoses. You've got fibromyalgia. You've blown a disc. They're put into these entities, and they take away the notion of process.
mm.
And you know, even with older people, now that I'm old, Joe, now 50 years, older people, and you realize we all get these aches and pains, but so many people think they're wearing out. No, we're not. We're processes. We're adapting. We're adapting to it. And most aches and pains go, most, not all, in a few days. So I hope I'm not raving on too much here, Joe, but this
No.
really excites me. This is where I think one of the big shifts is going to be. And just a couple more thoughts on education.
Mm,
Education is not just information delivery as people think. Exercise is education.
mm.
Movement is education, particularly if the patient's got skills of reflection, of analysis to deeply embed that. And you know, I always love a little quote. My friends, in the behavioural world, use a lot of expectation violation, which I
Mm,
do too. You know, you
mm,
encourage a patient to do something that they thought they couldn't do. They have a win, and it's great. But somebody once said to me, "Hey, Dave, quality education could be 100 expectation violations in one session," and I really, really like that. I
yeah,
really, really like that.
yeah, yeah.
So.
There's so much here. There's so much
There
here to
is so much.
unpack.
There's so much there to unpack, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I think we'll just dive in a little bit further into this, if that's okay with
yeah,
you.
yeah,
So, this idea of the pain science education, which is often the thing that we may get a little bit sort of caught up on, trying
yeah,
to help people to understand the pain science, and that will help them to understand their pain, etc.
yeah.
So, but what you're saying is that education is so much broader than that, and that our understanding of what pain education is has evolved so much more. What would be some of the
Uh,
key things that that truly good education looks like now?
I think it looks like oh, Joe, there's a lot in that question.
Yeah.
I probably, to answer, I'd probably go back to the comment I made before is that, where is the patient at this
Yeah.
particular time? And if I was to give another key thing that I would consider is what kind of misconception do the patients have? Now you've got to be careful here about what is a misconception, but old traditional thinking was let's just change these ideas. But a modern thinker would think, what kind of misconception does the
Mm.
patient have?
Okay.
So, for example, some people might just have what we call, missing bits. So you can fill in the gaps, and it might just be affirmation. Yes, you were right. Yes, a disc heals slower than muscle. Others have what we call single grains of misconception, where you only have to give one or two little bits of advice and things change. But unfortunately, most of our patients, particularly in the chronic pain world, have misconceptions which are really, really deeply embedded. And take, for example, the common thing, I have pain, therefore I'm damaged.
Yeah.
Now, I reckon the clinicians here listening would be able to think of probably 10 10 things, issues where the person has come to that idea. What's on X-ray, what they've told them, previous things, what happened to the neighbor, etc., etc. So
Mm.
again, a critical thing here in education is to try and pick up these pieces and what we call deconstruct the sandcastle. And still, one of the most powerful things I have found, or my view, is using the protectometer to try and pick up, unpack the person's story, and then carefully repack it in hopefully a better way.
Yeah. Yeah. These, yes, core principles that
Yeah.
still stand.
The core principles still stand. I think all the professionals here have their really good standard assessment, and
Mm.
I guess what I'm pushing here is for let's just take this a little bit. We can take this a little bit further, a little bit deeper, or as I like to say, let's lift the lid off the problem and peer in a little bit. I'm not saying you're going to psychologize the problem. I'm just going to
Mm.
say you're going to be a quality educator, up to date.
Yeah. Yeah. You're staying in your
So that's
lane.
So we could talk about education for a while, but the contemporary clinician's also going to be a mobilizer and a mover. And would you like to hear a little bit about that?
We would love to. I've
Well,
got a quick question, Dave, before we go
oh,
on. So
Joe, you
what
always
is a
did, yeah,
mobilizer and a mover? And it's from Beth Owen. Thank you, Beth.
yeah.
Great question. How do we figure out what type of learner the patient is?
Ah, well, I'm going to answer that in a way you might think it's a bit weird. There is the clinical vibe, the kind of learner. You pick it. So an example might well be the person who's had had an injury 2 or 3 years and they now come to see you, but they believe it's one thing sort of did that. All right. So well,
Mm.
it could even be that health professional hurt me, didn't help me, or it's work's fault. So that's one of the key things that someone is a very linear thinking. Um, they're probably very much in an entity sort of a thinking. They believe it's this. They've got to have to seek the diagnosis has to be correct, etc., etc. Um, you could also I'm not on the selling book thing here, but in Explain Pain Supercharged, there is a section on
Yeah.
helping pick the emergent learner and the more sort of a linear learner,
Mm.
and a little model to help them over into emergent thinking to give them an emergent scaffold. There's some good references there too about how this has been done for university students and also for undergraduates.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. That was a great answer. And thanks, great question, Beth. So okay, let's moving on now to talk about the being a mobilizer as a
Well, this is going to
clinician.
be quick here because I want to talk more about the garden in a moment, Joe.
Yeah, let's do
But
mobilizing and then we'll go on to
okay,
the
well,
naturalist.
obviously, I just want to say a couple of things here. Graded active mobilization is an essential skill, and many of the listeners will be far better at this than me. But I want to say that those who have a hands-on license use it and never give it up. We may not be manipulating, pushing, prodding anywhere near as much in the past, but this hands-on pain education, touching in the appropriate part, getting a wriggle and a grind around there when a person needs it, putting it in the right context, hands on. And some of our patients haven't had hands touch the sore bits in a judicious way for many years. Never give it up. And the
Mm.
other point I want to make in the contemporary clinician as a mobilizer, to use strategies, to be aware of strategies that slip under the radar of pain. And that is those in graded motor imagery, left-right discrimination skills, motor imagery skills, and mirrors where appropriate. This is all still exercising vast swathes of the brain. And of course, it's educational opportunities at the same time. Why are you showing me a mirror? How can just thinking of a movement help? Which might
Mm.
lead into a discussion of sort of mirror neurons, for example.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I'm David Bolton, who's in the audience, is a huge advocate of this kind of hands-on, and he always has this fantastic saying, which is the hands are another way of talking to the brain, and I
Yeah, that's a
lovely.
lovely thing, and we don't give it up. But I would, I used to be a mad manipulator. Everybody came in and got a whack or a crack somewhere, but I've had to realize in my 50 years of reflection that that's not appropriate for everybody. But I'd still probably touch everybody that I see still, and the first visit it might just be a hand on the shoulder. You're going to be okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
touch.
very powerful and shouldn't
Yeah.
be lost.
And so the clinician's also a coach, and you've heard this statement. I think listeners would have heard this many, many times, and I think many are taking it on. And I quite like that notion. And the fundamental thing is that if you're with a patient, that patient's only going to be with you 0.5% of the
Mm,
week. So what happens in the rest of the week? And this obviously links into constructive education because you are giving them the knowledge to continue. And if you look at some of the key elements of a top quality coach, whether it's in the sporting team or whatever, what do? They got short and long-term goals, and they really focus on them.
mm,
They keep communication up always. They're there for the long haul, and I really like that. And they quietly build independence. And that again links into this constructive education we're talking about. Good coaches are essentially constructivists.
I love that. Thank you. That's really fascinating. Okay, there's just so
So
much, Dave, but we can only sort of skim the surface in this webinar today. We could deep dive
yeah, that's all right.
everything,
Yeah,
but we're,
we could
but
have a
we're
session on each of these, but Joe, I know I've got a bit of time. I would like to touch because it's my favorite um, the clinician as naturalists,
So
as
I think this
nature.
is probably the most intriguing of the four roles, the
Yeah,
one that I least expected, and I didn't really know what you meant by it when you sent me the title for today's session. So let's talk about
well,
the
it's my own
clinicians and
late
naturalists.
in life philosophical shift to realize that it is increasingly important for personal and societal health to achieve integration or reintegration physically, emotionally, physiologically, immunologically too,
Mhm.
technologically with natural systems. All right. And this divide from natural systems has huge, terrible benefits for health. So,
Mm,
said another way, it's seeking interconnection with nature. So, as I said to you earlier, some of my work now, as I said, I see a few patients, but I'm increasingly taking these messages to garden clubs and health professionals. And interestingly, as I'm doing it, I'm increasingly challenging ageism as well in these talks. So many people stop gardening or even visiting public parks far too early, and it's often based on faulty information. So, for a contemporary clinician, I'm going to suggest that there's enormous benefits of engaging nature. Now, the database is really strong out there.
mm,
And there's also takes you into a deeper side because it allows reflection on climate issues, diversity
mm,
issues, embodiment, and nature culture binaries. And by that I mean this thinking that's out there that nature's kind of something out there, all right?
mm,
Out there. And often, unfortunately, Indigenous people, sometimes females are put in the out there field. However, they're all part of us. So
mm.
let's just talk briefly about the health benefits. The others require quite a deep discussion, but just a quick snapshot. This is what I might tell some of my groups. The exact same exercise program works better, and that's physical and mental measurements outside than inside. Exam results are better if you sit under a tree for 1 hour before the exam. Dental surgery hurts less if you can see green. One pot plant in a computer room lessens blood pressure. The astronauts with their little gardens up there have always come back and said, thank God for the gardens. It's a connection to Earth. And aware hospitals now have more and more gardens. And Florence Nightingale was aware of that after the Crimean War. And there's a really nice study. You'll quite like this study, Joe. It's a large longitudinal study done in the Australian city of Dubbo. It's inland New South Wales. It was a 17-year longitudinal study, 3,000 people in this city, and the study was essentially seeking variables to what might ward off dementia, right? The three variables that emerged, number one, walking,
Yeah.
number two, gardening, and number three, you like this, Joe, maintaining your level of alcohol intake.
No
Now,
way.
yes.
You made
Now,
that. You're making this up, Dave.
no, that's actually quite true. So if you were a non-drinker at the start and you carried that through, good. If you had 3 beers a night and carried it through, good. But if you suddenly exploded, then there was a. So it's a big study, lots of things. But again, it pushes this gardening nature thing. So I tell stories to my groups, and I thought I might tell you some of my stories that I tell the groups, and I do them to my patients and clients as well too. And it's a big topic, and I've actually categorized it into nature, our teacher, nature, our lover, nature, our protector, nature, our coach, and we are nature. So just some examples in my session on nature, our teacher. Everything matters in nature for a quality garden. You know, the right soil, the sunlight, here the bloody possums come in and eat, the right things growing in the right place. But everything matters in chronic pain too.
Mm.
Everything matters. So many things come together to construct chronic pain. I tell my gardeners they're already neuroscientists. And the other thing too in nature, our teacher, is that change is inevitable. In nature, change is inevitable. So it is in pain. And interestingly, Joe, these two things were key findings in the recent leak study in the Journal of Pain 2 or 3 years ago, when 300 to 400 people who got better with the kind of stuff Noi teaches or
Yeah.
improved significantly, when they were asked what was the information that they had that they thought really helped them, two of the key things were, hey, this is changeable. It's on the cards. It's hard. And the other thing, the key thing was many things are coming together to construct my pain experience. Therefore, many things can change it. There's always somewhere to start. And the gardeners already know that in nature. And then I love talking about nature, our lover. It's interesting. You give talks to some garden clubs and they think that this is the erotic section coming up and they get a bit excited. But but it covers things like bonding with nature. And I'd ask people, you know how you feel good when you walk into a public garden, right?
Mm.
Particularly one you're familiar with, that you visit often. You feel good when you go into your own garden. And that's essentially oxytocin. And oxytocin, which we all produce, females produce more than males, but males produce it too, I have to tell them. Oxytocin, obviously useful in childbirth, but it calms you down. It makes you less sensitive. It makes you more trusting. So there's love with nature. And even in a gardening club, I says, hey, we're related to nature. Nature gives us oxygen. We breathe out, it'll take out carbon dioxide. We love each other. This linking, and there's a lot in this story. I might tell people about the phytoncides, the phytoncides discussion. Now, these are compounds that are released from like particularly pine trees or trees where you get this, you like this really nice smell. Even onions and garlic or anything that you like and smell it sort of releases these phytoncides, which is also a calmer down. And there's a bit of evidence it might even limit natural killer cell activity. That's part of the Japanese forest bathing that you
Yes.
that you hear about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in nature, our lover, Oh, look, I've got a bit of time. I've got to tell you one of my favorite things. There's this thing called the Duchenne smile. Now, Duchenne was a famous French neurologist, of course, and he did some research and it's been followed up beautifully. Now, the Duchenne smile is when your whole face engulfs and every wrinkle twinkles, all right? So you know how people have a fake smile? Yeah, but there's the real smile. Now, if you give somebody flowers or vegetables from your garden and you can induce a real big smile, everything comes into play. That's been shown to lead to a feeling, a good feeling that'll last up to 2 days after.
No way.
Yes,
Oh
and
my
it that
gosh.
works better if you give it from your garden. It doesn't work so well with chocolates.
It's something that you've grown.
Something that you've gone and shared, and it's a gratitude sharing.
That is
So that's
amazing.
nature. And then we do things about nature, our protector. So this is essentially a discussion on the immune system. So we talk about the beautiful old friends, bacteria in soil, the ones
Mm,
that have been there since the year dot, the ones that we've grown up with, evolved with. And these, or access to these, encourages or allows a more diverse gut biome.
yeah.
It signals the immune system into a more protective state. The more diverse your gut is, then the more immune challenges that it can essentially handle. And this is the mycobacteria in soil. Now, you don't want to go sniffing the dry stuff, the dry soil you might buy in some shops. There's the rare Legionnaires' disease is there, but
Mm,
but the good quality mulchy stuff, the smell. And there's a lot of that in England under trees.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I get a bit excited about this because I was hunting around what would be the ideal dose to give a dose of this Mycobacterium vaccae, and it's not much. It might only be 5 to 10 minutes. So my patients might think I'm a bit crazy when I'm saying, "Hey, let's do some walking. Let's do some walking bare feet." All right. And that gives your brain
Wow.
a lovely flush, a lovely sculpting of the representations in the brain. And we also do a nature protectometer. Now, I think most listeners might be familiar with the protectometer, where we look for DIMS and SIMS. It's essentially
Mm,
unpacking a person's pain experience. And I always look at the DIMS and SIMS as a sort of immune balance. And so finding the SIMS, for example, in the categories of things you hear, see, smell, taste, and touch. Now that's important, and I would encourage some to go to the market and find 5 different smells, or look
mm,
for 6 different shades of green. It's essentially seeking observation with intent. All right, observation with intent.
yeah.
That's a deeper thing. We talk back about in the garden and the oxytocin, but if you go in with intent, know a plant, see it through its ups and downs, touch it, nourish it, give it a name, give intent, you will have a
Mm,
deeper a deeper response. The things you do, plant something different, I say. Visit public gardens, repot. These are all sims which are
mm,
healthy, and we can argue they're immunologically healthy. Things you believe. One of my gardeners told me once, do you know, after this, I realized my garden is a gym, a pharmacy, a club, and a supermarket. And I wrote that down. I said, go, go. The places you go, any gardens, nature, TV shows is also healthy. People you hang out with.
yeah.
Well, need I say any more? So
Amazing.
so even nature, our pain coach, is the other thing I talk about, and I also believe I've talked about oldies, but this is important for children too. Do you know children who garden at an early age will have a much better diet later on?
Yeah.
And I think psychologically too, because they've seen things live and die, that life's not just a straight, life isn't just a
Mm,
straight line.
mm,
So it's healthy for children, but particularly older people. And it's something Tasha Stanton speaks about a lot, the sweet zone. And I'm with my patients and I'm looking for a sweet zone of activity in the garden. things they can do, things they might be able to change, but to keep up that gardening, to keep there. We use the Twin Peaks model. Many people would have seen and explained pain that can be applied to gardening. Some pain's okay. Don't let a flare up ruin your day. We talk about, we have a constructivist view to a flare up. It's not just saying
Mm.
don't do it, but let's work out what it was behind, what was going on at the same time. Where were you at?
Yeah.
It's unlucky you've hurt yourself. You just had a rather nasty pain blast. And again, for my oldies, this notion I said before, adaptation, not damage. A few aches and pains are okay. I'm thinking, I love the Audrey Hepburn quote. Audrey Hepburn was a really keen gardener, and she gave away a lot of her vegetables. And she had this quote, which is attributed to her, which is, "To plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow." And I really, really, really like that.
Lovely.
And we're running a little bit out of time, I see now. The last bit was where we are nature, and this is the
Mm.
story of embodiment, the here. And I would seek in my patients, clients, or anybody who want to listen, to sort of reflect. When you're away from your garden or your favorite public space where you've watched something grow, you're never really away from it. And when you come home, it's one of the first things you take a look at. You're really checking yourself out. Even, when I start to prune in the garden, I feel bad at first because I think I'm cutting my friends. But you soon get over that. If someone gets in your garden and steals some veggies or flowers or a pot plant, you want to kill them. But if you give stuff away, you feel really good. And this is all, it's because it's embodied. It's nature is sort of in us. And look, if I had to summarize that in a key message for listeners, if nature is a part of you, as I've just briefly touched on, and I see some
Mm.
of the comments there are quite agreeing with this, if nature is a part of us, and of course it is, and if you are seeking change, if you change your nature habits, your relationship with nature, you're actually changing yourself. So
Mm.
change is hard. It can be hard, but relationship with nature may be a good place to start. And
Mm.
whether it's a pot plant going out longer or taking on some of these reflection skills, then that may be where some people need to start or can start.
Yeah,
So
amazing.
so I've raved on a little bit, and I think you've got a few more questions, Joe, before we finish.
Well, I think actually, Dave, that's a really good place to sort of pull it all together. Just to wrap it up. I think we can see through this conversation that Dave's touched on a few different elements of being a contemporary clinician. But the bit that I have to say I found the most uh, wonderful and energizing was the naturalist part of it. And I think that you've gone through your career and you've come to this point. And I think that what would be my question here? In this sort of
I,
scheme of things, where do you feel like your passion now sits in the entirety of what we've talked about? So, looking back on what you've presented over your career about pain,
It
education, and
it sort
understanding
of
pain, where does it
excites me. Just to
sit?
go back, there was a question earlier on talking to patients, and I would probably now have a question when I ask the patient almost universally, what's your relationship with nature? And
Mm.
and some people look at you strangely, just as I would now ask, how does world events sort of affect you to talk about the bigger picture driving pain states. But I still get excited. I even get really excited. And you asked me this question. Patients come in armed with Google and all sorts of explanations, and you think, oh gosh,
Mm.
I rejoice in that. You have to because it sets up a constructivist two-way discussion early on. It
Mm.
forces clinicians to be constructivist discussions, and they'll all come with misconceptions anyway. And of
Mm.
course, if someone's got something on Google or they've read something, just remember it's usually new information. It's not deeply embedded. So a
Yeah.
caring clinician talking back and forward, if it's inappropriate, you should be able to take it out.
Mm.
So what still excites me, Joe? Basic sciences always will. And I thought we knew everything they can know about the immune system, and now there's all this predictive processing and all this stuff. And I'm trying to get AI into my work and get an agent going. But it's probably the most exciting thing for me now is the missing groups that are now coming into the picture. And I
Mm.
see this explain well going into these missing groups. I mentioned earlier into stroke, into complex regional pain syndrome, into children's pain, to adolescents' pain.
Mm.
The life of an adolescent is so different to the adult. These untouched pain areas, they're calling out for evidence, calling out for help.
Mm.
So, and I think it's exciting times. I look and reflect, it is really exciting times in the world of pain medicine, really exciting work, but we've got to make it exciting for these groups as well.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Thank you, Dave. So much in there. We are just going to pull that into the EP3 event now, and you're going to be talking in more depth about a lot of this at that event. So
Yes, gosh, I'm coming back.
I know, I can't
I'm coming
wait to
back to
see.
Manchester. I'm hoping to have a few Theakston's beers and the
Yes,
like up in the north.
absolutely. So we're going to do some of that that drinking that we talked about earlier that's so essential for avoiding dementia.
Yes, I did say it's the same level, not going mad. So I don't want
Yeah,
that to go
that's
wrong.
good. Bit of walking as well, and
Oh yes, and a bit of walking, and of course, if I go back to that walking, it's walking with intent, not just walking to get to somewhere, but
yeah,
walking with observation around, walking and bringing in all the sensory cues that come in a patient that knows, in a person that knows that if you're working those sensory pathways, you can essentially override some of the pain pathways there, which is the story I would give many patients.
fantastic. So, Dave, what's so cool about an EP3? We've got one. It's in
Oh,
Manchester at the
look.
beginning of June. You've done loads of these. Just tell everybody what's so
Well, I
cool
think we've had
about
about 10 of
EP3.
them now here in Australia, New Zealand, and in the United States. Look, for me, I'm going to really push the clinical direction here. I've got sessions on constructivist education, nature-based therapies. I'm going to interview clinicians. I'm also going to talk about the forgotten peripheral nervous system because everybody's got it, the bloody brain, it's all the
Mm,
trendy place to be. But there's a bit of forgetting about the body as well too, and the world of hands-on, in many cases of skill physical examination and skill physical treatment as well. Um, I do know that my colleagues there, Lorimer Mosley will be there, Tash Stanton will be there, my dear old friend Mick Thacker will be there.
mm,
There's another 3 or 4 stars who'll be coming as well too. But the the joy of EP3 has always been it's small and compact. We never like to take too many people, and to us it's a great chance to meet people, and the people who come can share their stories, share their issues with everybody there. And Joe, I'm certainly looking forward to meeting some old friends, relics from the past, I said. Coming back to the UK, I haven't been for a while. I thought I was retired, and certainly making some new friends. So can't wait to be there.
no, we can't wait to see you, Dave. And thank you for your time today. And thank you to
Pleasure.
everybody for joining us live and for your brilliant questions. It was so interesting that the questions stopped when you were talking about your nature. And that means that everybody's just listening, which is wonderful. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thanks for your questions. Thanks for your time. And we are so blessed to have such passionate people in our community, well, their ideas and wisdom and enthusiasm for the future. So thank you. Take care, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your evening. If you want to watch this back, it'll be on YouTube. And yeah, that's it for today, Dave, and I shall see you in Manchester.
Great. Any questions that flow back to you, Joe, you can send them to me.
I
Yep.
will
As
do.
I said, I'm retired and I do answer a few questions.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks,
Great.
Dave. I'll see
Thank
you
you.
soon. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye bye, everybody. Thanks for
Bye-bye.
joining.